Dr. Mule Misao is the National Coordinator of ELOG, which is the Election Observation Group. He's here with us this morning. Good morning, Mule.
Good morning to you.
And Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year to all of you.
15th was the day that we stopped, but you know...
it will continue for some while, I think.
Okay.
Kosalama?
Tuko salama kabisa.
Dr. Kenneth Ombongi is Associate Dean, Research and Postgraduate Studies at the University of Nairobi. He's here with us this morning. Fantastic historian. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Andrew. Good to be here.
Good to be here. Good to see you.
Spicing up things, I can see. The new year.
A little bit of turmeric and ginger.
Oh, yes. We are here.
Yeah.
Hi, morning.
Morning, karibu sana.
Okay.
Good to see you both. But of course, it's going to be delicate, this conversation, but necessary for us to have. Before we do that, Dennis has taken us to Algeria.
Yes.
This week. He's trying to convince us that scary-looking animal is the beautiful one, but okay. He'll give you the details of that.
The animal we talk about represents Algeria because they say it's a beautiful animal, and that is the large-eared fennec fox. And for the same way we say in Kenya, the big five is our pride and joy. The large-eared fennec fox is their pride and joy. But it's also a country where when you visit, here in Kenya, you want black tea. Them, they have mint tea. So when you visit Algeria, you just have mint tea. But that aside, remember, 90% of the country is a desert, Sahara Desert. Fuel, petrol product is cheaper than water because it's predominantly a desert. So having water is much more expensive than buying fuel. Maybe much more we can learn from that because we have lots of water here that goes into waste, but conversation for another day. But let's go to the proverb. People who do not know your worth or virtues might do you harm. Actually, how would you interpret that?
People who do not know your worth
Or virtues
or virtues
might do you harm.
might do you harm. Very interesting one. Basically, the way I understand it, and probably it could be captured better by the Kiswahili proverb, asiyekujua hakutamini.
Hey.
Maybe we could have gone near here and grasped that one. But generally what it's saying is that people who are not aware of who they are dealing with, they may not necessarily value you or take you seriously or give you a chance to do what you ought to do in certain environments. And, that goes to caution us that always do not underestimate those you do not know. And do not write off, things or people that you don't know what their strengths are, and think that you can take them for a ride and kick them here and there.
Yeah.
So you never know. Always look at a certain situation with some level of caution, and know that people could have something that you may not appreciate. And don't intend to do harm just because you're not aware of what they bring to the table.
Dr. Musao.
I totally agree with Mwalimu. There's also another Swahili proverb which says mcheza kwao utuzwa. That the person, if people know you, they value, they honor you. But I totally agree that I think what this proverb basically means, African proverbs were basically instruments to guide the society. So my understanding would be that you need to take your time to know people before you make any judgments, before you make any conclusions on them, because it may just surprise you, as Dr. is saying. So I think from where I sit, it's a caution. That people may have more than the face value.
Sure.
That you see, and therefore you need to take your time.
True. All right. So we're getting into this, and of course, we often say that in order for us to look at the present, or to be able to discuss or understand what's happening presently or what might happen in the future, that we have to look at what happened in the past to understand what's happening in Uganda. We'll go into that in just a little bit. But Uganda decides what happened was yesterday when Uganda went to the polls. Voting underway, polls closed. Ugandans voted on the 15th, which was yesterday, for both presidential and parliamentary elections. Polling stations faced delays, especially due to biometric machine failures, surprise, surprise, and logistic problems. Elog can tell us now when we use those words what exactly they mean. Voting and vote counting took place amid an internet shutdown, but restricted access to social media and SMS. The first official presidential results were awaited late or last night, and they were expected initially. An initial tally was expected about 10:30 last night. Another surprise that might take you also for surprise now, that early indications suggested incumbent President Yoweri Museveni ahead, with opposition leader Bobi Wine lagging in initial results. So we'll open that up just a little bit. But key issues during the election, which we can go into right now: internet blackouts and restrictions. Government shut down much of the internet ahead of and during election day. What we are seeing is that in the lead-up, authorities ordered some rights groups to hold halt operations, and critics, including journalists and activists, faced arrests and intimidation. International observers and UN officials had warned of repression, intimidation, and restricted civil space before the vote. Bobi Wine and his party have alleged ballot stuffing, arrests of their party agents, and other irregularities on election day. There was heavy deployment of security forces, particularly in urban areas, adding to tensions, but apparently keeping major unrest limited. Look, that's the picture that we get. We're still not hearing anything yet, but you can smell the onion, so you think that somebody's cooking in the kitchen. Something's happening.
And putting on some spices.
Right, exactly. We'll start with you. What from your observation so far?
Well, all these things, a lot of the things that you've mentioned have directly affected us as observers. ILOG is part of a fraternity of regional observers known as the Eastern Horn of Africa Election Observers Network. We have members in Uganda, we have members in all our surrounding countries within the East African community, even the Horn of Africa, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Somalia, and others. And two of those members were the ones who were banned, their permits withdrawn in Uganda. Then we also had the chair of that particular network, who is called Dr. Sarah Birete, arrested on the 30th of December last year, arraigned in court on the 3rd. And she was pending more investigations by the police. She was remanded until the 21st, until after the elections, basically.
Of course.
So that's a leading figure in the electoral justice issues in Uganda. Was put away. We have also now these other issues, the permits withdrawn for quite a number of organizations, and then now we have the internet shutdown. So. Is it a different picture from what we've seen from Uganda? This is exactly the template that has been used by the Ugandan authorities for the last, quite a number of electoral cycles. And I don't think it has changed any bit. We expect, the idea is that we need to have people elections which are transparent. If we are going to have any iota of credibility of that election, when you shut down the internet and shut down and make this a much more opaque process, then anybody can speculate anything. So one of the reasons why nobody's getting a lot of the information, you're depending on those virtual private networks, and you're depending on just making direct calls, which you cannot be able to verify. Means that there could be other things which are cooking beyond the onions that you can smell. So we don't think that's a very favorable environment in which you can be able to hold credible elections. As expected, the information that is coming through is that the incumbent is winning. So that is not unexpected under the circumstances. We only hope, and we do, because we do have a number of monitors on the ground who are documenting, since now we cannot be able to relay and talk, we do have people who are taking note of what is happening. We hope that we can be able to share much more information once this process is over, once we can be able to get the data and analyze it much more comprehensively. We can be able to also speak authoritatively on the electoral process and some of the technical aspects of it.
Sure.
I mean, Dr. Mbonge, as we look at the elections in Uganda right now, one would just say, like you keep saying, if you want to look at the future, you just need to look at the past, the history on how things have been done before. But even while at it, then one asks the question, in an election process where everything is closed off, where people are not getting information, the world does not know what is happening in Uganda. What is happening in Uganda remains in Uganda. How then can one ever come out to say that this was a democratically elected government if that cannot be verified?
Thank you very much for that question. When you say what happens in Uganda remains in Uganda, it reminds me of what the Americans say about Las Vegas.
Vegas.
What happens in Las Vegas remains, although in a different context, not politics.
Yes.
Now, let me begin from a quick note. Andrew, you said in the beginning that you are surprised.
I was being sarcastic, but okay.
All right. So, I mean, if I took you very seriously, and I could have simply said, you're not from Africa, you can't be surprised that the incumbent is actually leading. That's expected.
Yeah.
But back to the question you asked, my brother here. You see, it is true. And Winston Churchill, the former British Prime Minister, said this, that the further back you look, the better chance you stand to understand the present and the future. What is happening in Uganda actually has echoes or resonates with what I see as a shared heritage that the East African countries have had even from the colonial period. And for these, two of these are key in understanding what is happening in Uganda, what happened in Tanzania in last October, and most probably what will happen in Kenya in August 2027. And one of these key tenets is that we inherit from colonialism. All the three countries that formed the original East Africa, now other pretenders have come in and say that we are East Africa. We inherited a centralized state built for command and not consent. Power, transited in what we call independence, which changed basically the color of leadership. But every so often, the architecture of the colonial state remained intact. You can take that to the bank. As I said here last time, they are probably just about to open.
Right.
Power remained concentrated in the center, authority personalized around an individual. That's one key tenet we need to remember. And it has not fundamentally changed. The second one is that what we call elections today were actually rituals of transition, not alteration, not change of power. They were simply rituals of order rather than instruments of change of leadership. And that has remained intact in this region. Of course, there are variations initially, but these variations within the three countries were determined by the personalities who led these countries first. But the architecture on which the governance was built was on this, particularly on matters elections, was on these two basic tenets. The slight changes, if you go to Tanzania, Tanzania was a country first led by a young man, an overly idealist, a scholar by excellence, Mwalimu. No wonder he was called Mwalimu, although, interesting, all of them were Walimus at the time, including our Uli Jomo. They were walimus. But Nyerere was more mwalimu than the rest. Because of his idealism, he creates an environment that gives a semblance of a nation. But really ended up creating what I always see as a strong state, but a weak economy. Then you go to Uganda, another young man. Obote was actually 39 years, Nyerere was 36. Another young man who was not as erudite as Nyerere, and who was not as careful as Kenyatta, and he could not manage the ethnic multiplicity of Uganda, and Uganda crumbled. By the 1970s, things had fallen apart, if I may use the phrase of in Uganda. Now, in Kenya, Kenya was just a young country, under the whims of an old man, more careful, more cautious. Literally transited the structures of the colonial state and maintained them the way they were, lest he wrecks the boat. And by the 1970s, Kenya emerges as a strong economy, but a very weak nation, very weak state, but a very strong economy because it was built by on the basis of the colonial structures with the cosmetic. Those are the changes that you can talk about. But the tenets remain: a centralized state, and elections were not for change of leadership, but rather managing order. Okay, that is what you see in Uganda with the internet blackout. With media suppression, with a country which is basically a police state. President Museveni was actually competing against himself.
Okay.
And definitely is actually going to win. That's why I was getting surprised that Andrew was surprised that he was.
Sarcasm comes out to play every now and then. But then from what we observed similar things in Tanzania.
Yeah.
Just a couple of months ago when we saw that the outside world is shut out. And the reason that was given at that time was that because we don't want any of the bad manners or bad behavior that happens in other countries to happen in Tanzania. I mean, to that effect, it was said. In this case, or any case for that matter, why would you shut out the rest of the world in a process that should be seen to be transparent and above board and above reproach when it comes to the democratic decision that people will make to select a leader?
Dr. Ali has already given you a very good contextual background to what ails us, even because when you talk about democracy, then if you look at it from the backdrop of what Dr. Ali has just explained, where you're coming from, and I think he was also being polite because he never said we were just basically a company. It's a company which was operating here. We never had a state in the true definition of what a democratic state is. We were basically companies, British East African Company. Yep. And that company structure, which is usually a centralized command system, is what we still have. And therefore, to talk about democracy, I think where a lot of our efforts for people who have been and especially in the election space has been on how we can be able to rebuild those structures moving forward. Not so much about what actually exists. We interrogate what exists because those are the structures which are there. But when you look at them, when you go deeper, you'll find an infrastructure which Dr. Ali has just explained, which is a command system where they can be able to make decisions at whim. The aristocracy within this region makes decisions, and it's an elite conspiracy basically all the way since independence, and that is the perpetuation. Therefore, you can be able to see it. Tanzania had pretended a little bit to be freer, much more social, but when some agitation, some tentacles, some issues were raised by the young people, suddenly they fold up. And then they go back to the old mode that has been there. So I don't think we have. I think the biggest challenge that we have, not just in East Africa but in Africa, is how we can be able to transition into full democratic practices. So it's basically experiments which we are trying across the continent, appealing from pushing it from a demand. We want to be a citizen-driven demand that we transit from those companies, from that central command system into a much more democratic one, where the decisions are made from bottom up, as a phrase as the old goes bottom up, basically, because that's how democracy is supposed to be able to function, where people can make a decision about I was laughing about this internet thing because everybody is using it. In Romania there was a very interesting spectacle in 2024 where there was a so-called internet candidate, or a candidate who was propped up by social media and actually won the election. But then later on, they were able to interrogate the process and found something wrong with the system, and that election was nullified. They had to redo elections last year. Now, at least they opened themselves to the internet. They never shut down the internet, but they were able to interrogate the system to be able to find what faults there could be with the internet. Because you don't say, shutting the internet and shutting people from speaking to each other is basically like, gagging everybody in the streets. If there was no internet, it's like moving around and putting, gags on everybody's mouth and telling them, don't talk. That is not practical. That makes sense.
And you see, as we talk about the internet gagging, or rather the blackout today that we see in Uganda, remember, the same happened in Tanzania as well.
Yes.
And remember, immediately after Raila Odinga passed on, there are 8 bills that were passed, and among them was the Computer Misuse Amendment Act that was passed. And that, many have said, will give the powers to the leadership of the country to switch off the internet. Are we surprised that that is happening? And Daktari, as we talk about that then, you call the entire structure of the region a company, right? And that power is central on an individual. The people have no say. Is that true?
Historically, it's true, because the manifestations of what we see today, its roots are in our history. You see, initially, what was called British East Africa was actually a property of the company, which got its royal charter in 1888, the Imperial British East Africa Company. And it started trading here, from the coast, all these mountains, our fair bears, beautiful wildlife, you call it the Big Five. Including our own ancestors, were a property of a company. And a Scotsman called William Mackinnon. This is the guy who built Mackinnon Road, which we now call Mombasa Road, which was supposed to open up to the interior from the coast, where they operated predominantly from Mombasa at the time. The company just folded because it went under in 1895. And then Mackinnon says, we can now hand it over to the British, because the Germans were just next door in Tanganyika. They could easily take it over. The Ethiopians were advancing from, the Italians were advancing from Ethiopia and Somalia. So they handed over to the Colonial Office. So it became, a protectorate of the places, establishing a very centralized system. So that is what comes to independence. The British never changed much, because Kenya was valued for its economic significance. Initially, it was not the place they were to be, for example. They were heading to Uganda. So it was valued for its economic. That's why they built the railway, basically for extraction. Not to construct, not to build, but to extract the resources of the country. Throughout the colonial period, that did not change. When we had a transition, which many of you wrongly call independence, the elites changed. The political elites just changed from the white ones to the black ones. Yep. But the power plays continued. The company, quote unquote, continued. The extraction continued. Now, between the elites in Nairobi, working with their supporters outside London, Washington, and all that. So we had what political scientists call the comprado class here. So that fundamentally did not change. So what we call elections, my brother, is a ballot without transfer.
Why?
When elections do not elect, that is the situation that we are talking about. So what you see as democracy in Tanzania, in Uganda, with the ongoing elections, and Kenya, is actually a choreography of democracy, who the elites fear its consequences. So they basically manage it. They manage it in ways that resonate with managing the company. And I think that is what Muli was basically saying. That's why in Uganda, you see a situation where courts, curbs, and the criminalization of dissent are used to control the people. What kind of competition is it there when Kisa Besigye is in court? Bobi Wine is being hunted like a criminal. What kind of elections do you expect in a situation like that?
Right.
This exposes really a very deep paradox that you find in East Africa. And that is a paradox that I call competitive politics within an uncompetitive state.
And one would then, we wonder, because then what is it that if Museveni now, of course, likely greatly tipped to get into his 7th term, that has been at the helm of this country for 30 years, and at the age of 81, if we're going to talk about biology, he doesn't have too much, left in the chamber. But the question is, what is this thing? Or is it for us that as African nations, for who the transfer of power, not independence, took place, according to what Dr. Mbongi says, is that, are we looking at a situation whereby that power is too sweet and you want to stay in that position to then be able to control the people until, the curtains are closed on your life, literally?
Yeah.
Because what more would it be? And then can we truly say that we operate within democratic spaces if those are the things that we see happening?
It's a very interesting question and even direction in terms of discussion, because that becomes even the elephant in the room. This discussion around management of people, basically not democracy but management, through whether it's elections or through whatever is offered from the incumbents within the region, will also raises another issue. And that is the issue that you're talking about. When the the natural attrition happens, how then do you manage that transition? How will you manage that? And that's why there's been a lot of talk. I mean, you hear in Museveni, in Uganda, for instance, the first son has become an item of discussion in terms of. In fact, I think most of the decisions to many actors will be able to tell you that the person who's really pushing things in that country is their son, not even the president. So perhaps this is part of the management in terms of the transition, because question is, as Dr. Mbongi says, you've been muzzling the people, you've arrested the chief opposition, you have created a situation where Ugandans have a bone to pick with you. How then do you transit peacefully? How do you transit to the next stage? Who comes over? You remember in Kenya, for instance, when we had this the 2002 transition, there are very many people. If that change had not been managed, you saw people nearly even lynched the former president Moi when he was coming to Uhuru Park for the handover, because there is a feeling that you betrayed the nation. There's a feeling that you took us to the wrong direction, and therefore there is a fear for those who are the managers that there may come a time that they may be out of office and things will be everything will go against them. And therefore, they must manage those transitions. They must put in place mechanisms that allow a favorable transition to take place. So again, we go back to that elite conspiracy, and you see in quite a number of African countries where first families are organized in a manner to be able to take over. In Uganda, it's actually well illustrated, because now the son is not only just a son, but he's the head of the military.
For goodness sake.
I mean that is the most obvious way.
I mean, they control the military as a family.
Exactly.
Thing,
Yeah.
because other than the son, there's Museveni's brother.
Exactly.
Who is one of the senior military generals in Uganda.
Yeah.
But you see, and my brother here, what you see in Uganda is some kind of experiment in management of a country based on a false notion of stability without renewal. The grand old man of East Africa that we are dealing with in Uganda, this was a darling of donors in the 80s when he came to power.
Yes.
And gave Uganda a semblance of political stability and peace. And vowed that he would not stay for a long time.
He actually did say that, didn't he?
He vowed that the problem of Africa is actually old men who want to die in office.
Yes.
And I don't want to do that. With the strength of youth and the discipline of a soldier, we believed him. Look at what he has done. And that goes to say that really there is a semblance of stability which we try to manage at the expense of renewal, which is supposed to be the essence of democracy. You manage ethnic groups. In Uganda, for example, and if you go in, even the way they have shut down internet is ethnic based. The longest period that they have shut down is actually in Buganda and I think in Mbosoga.
Yeah.
Because those are the ethnic groups that he fears most. You know, in Uganda, while in Kenya we have Luophobia, in Uganda they have Bagandaphobia. You know, that's why internet has been closed longest within Buganda. The owners of what we call Kampala and much of what is the seat of power in Uganda. So you manage those ethnic groups and then get the assets of the country and privatize them, you know, and get clarion calls and say we are developing and we are going to if not Singapore, we are going to Canaan. You see, that is really the curse of Africa, not just Eastern Africa. But the beauty is this, and we saw that in Tanzania, that stability imposed from above is only turbulence delayed.
Yes.
That's true.
Nyerere, with all respect, and I respect Nyerere as an intellectual, we read him. You know, at some point, we even admired him. I have so many round-necked Chinese collar shirts that Nyerere used to wear. Sometimes we speak his language in our lecture theaters and all. But then he managed Tanzania in such a way that it could hardly survive outside him. And you remember that when he left, Mwinyi was Nyerere incarnate. Mkapa was Nyerere incarnate. Kikwete was now a grandchild, politically speaking. You know, when they lost that control, it actually proved that management from above, impressed on the people, is actually violence delayed.
Which then brings us to the next question. If you go back to the independence struggle, right? The white man did not just hand us over the powers to rule ourselves. It's the people who fought for that. It was the people who were tired and said, no, we have to do things our own way. And that brings us to the question where it's the people who have the power, right? Not those.
I mean, you're right.
It's arguable. It's arguable, right?
Yeah.
But then there is the feeling that those who are in power today control these countries as if the Mwananchi, regardless of which country you're looking at, does not have the power, which then asks the question, have the people forgotten the power they have, that they have surrendered that to those in leadership?
No, the challenge is how things happened historically. I keep on saying this, my brother. Yesterday, in my department of history and archaeology in the university, in our seminar, we were talking about Mau Mau. And one of the speakers made a remark that there's a limit to which you can put, that one lesson we learned from Mau Mau, which is Kenya's freedom struggle movement, is that you can actually not push people against a wall for too long. It will come to a point in which they say, no, this is the limit. And when they turn back, please find a place to do what? To hide. That's for a fact. But the reality in Kenya is that it is actually not Mau Mau that directly gave us independence. That's a mistake that we make. It is the British, when they crushed Mau Mau, they managed what you call the transfer of power. And they handed over power to what I said earlier, a comprado class led by Kenyatta I, who served the interests not of the people, but their own and the British one. That is why, just read your history. Who took power in Kenya? They were sons and daughters of chiefs. And the chiefs were actually the agents of colonialism. Just look at the powerful men in Kenya in the 1960s and 70s. They were sons of chiefs.
Okay.
Those who were in the provincial administration, they were sons of chiefs. I mean, just name any.
Senior Chief Koinange.
Senior Chief Koinange. Senior Chief Musa Nyandusi, the father of Simeon Nyachai. Chief Muhoho, Chief Njonjo, Chief. They were the sons, because these sons were men and women of privilege. Because they kowtowed the colonialism, they were given access to mission education, which was denied to the children of the radicals. So by the time we gained independence, the people who were erudite enough, meaning educated enough, were the sons and daughters of the colonial agents, called the chiefs.
So then as we go to...
And they are the ones who ran basically East Africa. Nyerere was a product of Scotland. He got his education in Edinburgh. Kenyatta lived in London for 15 years and spoke good English even more than the English themselves. He became their son-in-law. He married a daughter, Edina, of his employer in Essex, southeast England.
So I think that as we look across the African continent, that we can see a replication of this. That truth of facts is that the British East Africa was also replicated in British West Africa.
Exactly.
It was replicated even till today. The Francophone West African struggle is based on this very thing.
Exactly.
There are countries on the African continent today who are net exporters of France. Everything down to the bread that they eat every day comes out of that country. So now what we're talking about, an election then, it sounds almost scary to say, Mule, but are we saying that then elections essentially is just a CEO of the same elite ilk being passed from one person to the other? And until and unless the current CEO is tired, is satisfied with their position in that place, then we can talk until we're blue in the face. We can talk about an independent electoral commission. We can talk about election observers. We can talk about all these things about democracy and whatever, but we will never truly see proper progression of power to practiced by and for the people until this company mentality is shed.
My quick response before Dr. Ali comes in is much more well versed with this than myself in terms of from the historical background to what we have at present. What democracy? I don't want to use the word pretends to have. I hope it has. That it has the opportunity for redemption.
Yes.
Within it, it's inbuilt with opportunities for redemption. In my understanding, democracy as it should be, where we're talking about the people having their say. But it's the management structures. So it's a question about the attrition. Again, you go back to the law of attrition. That, how much time is required for our people to be able to rise up? We have seen opportunities. That Mau Mau struggle is an opportunity at redemption. It may not be the one which delivered, but it did signal something. I mean, it never managed the transfer of it because they never thought through the entire process of it. But the manager still came in and were able to create an artificial enterprise in the country, which extended and perpetuated, of course, their extraction process. But if we come just to the very recent past, what happened in Tanzania on the election day, what happened in Kenya over the last 2 years with the Gen Z, the younger people coming to the fore, there was a moment in 2024 after the first Gen Z uprising in Kenya. There were about 3 months or so that even the village chief was scared of getting into the office because he could be greeted. And he would be asked to account for his time and to account for his work. And members of parliament even disappeared from being seen in public spaces. They never flaunted their wares in front of us because suddenly there was a direct question which was coming from the young people themselves, and they were asking those leaders to account from the highest office to the lowest office. In those 3 months, there was an opportunity for redemption. I did see an opportunity for redemption. I did see power going back to the other side. And those are the things which are, of course, even that has been managed. Again, to use Dr. Mbongi's, there's a management process which is currently going on. But it's a question for me on how long it will take for what would call a critical mass of people to be able to make the move towards redeeming themselves within the kind of artificial enterprise that we already have. So the opportunity that I see is that part of this management is also stability. The other word for stability is also peace, and peace sells a lot for very many people. When you tell the parents of those Gen Zs who are killed in the streets whether they want to send any other young person to the street, they will be very cautious about it, because the state has a monopoly of power or of violence, and because of that, there's a management system already inbuilt. But the opportunity that is accorded through the democratic enterprise, some of those small gains or small wins can be got through elections if there was enough pressure from the people side, the demand side. And that citizen agency is one of the things that personally I would love to continue experimenting on, working on, because it is through citizen agency that you are able to raise these questions. But where you just walk into the ivory the corridors of power and have conversations in the same speak as they did in 1963, then you'll be managed. You'll be controlled, and the status quo will remain over time. So for me, the opportunity lies with the people, but how to organize the people. Part of it is what Mwalimu and others are doing by educating them, but also sensitizing them to the level where they can actually be able to be responsive to the state. When they become responsive, like the Tanzanians saw, Mama Suluhu was very pleasantly surprised that could happen in our country. I think she's still reeling from that up to today. That their young people could be able to rise up from nowhere. It's something which can shock a system. So in my view, their opportunity still does exist, despite this managing. But there is an opportunity that can be exploited.
Yeah, there is. Just to add to what Muli is saying, just look at the language that followed what we loosely call the Gen Z revolution. It wasn't a revolution in its real sense. I teach a course on revolutions in world history. We could probably call it more of an uprising than a revolution. Maybe it will grow into a revolution someday. Look at what followed that. the language of the country is bigger than all of us. We need, for any country to develop, we need peace and stability. You remember I said earlier that what has been our greatest curse, not just as Kenya, but as a region, is actually the belief in the status quo is better than a renewal. Democracy promises change and renewal. Democracy recognizes the multiple talents that the people in a country hold. That's why it believes in changing of leadership every so often, so that these multiple talents can be used in developing the country. Ours is actually the nurturing of status quo, using the language of peace and stability instead of renewal. If you didn't realize that the management immediately began, those young people, a few of them were gotten hold of, dressed smartly, and some of them have even sat where I'm sitting, and they have spoken very powerfully against their own agenda. What was dubbed, a movement that was leaderless, a movement that was partless, a movement that was faceless, a movement that was tribalist. We started seeing the tribal dimension to it. We started seeing elites being selected and speaking for the young people who had no spokesperson initially. That is where our problem is. Number two, you remember I said that ours, just like is in Uganda, Tanzania, is elections that does not elect. Ballots without transfer of power to anybody with new ideas to move the country forward. And this originates from the base on which these countries were built. You remember I said we have a shared heritage of an overly centralized state whose role is actually to maintain the status quo and pander to the whims of the global north and all those people, purportedly development partners, who support our survival.
Indeed.
That is why, as I finish, they will never want us to unite. In the 1960s, Osevego Kwame Nkrumah talked about the United States of Africa. Africa must unite. How long did he survive?
Did not very long.
He thought he was the most popular president until he was toppled. He got a shock that he would not recover, even when he retreated to Togo and Sylvanus Olympia, the president, made him a co-president just to console him. He was inconsolable. You get that? Muammar Gaddafi in Libya here talked about the United States of Africa and wanted to give the US dollar run for itself, and started this change. We own the gold. The largest depots of gold in the world are under our feet in this continent. So we can use it as a standard measure of our currency. African Central Bank. How long did he go?
Labeled a terrorist.
So you have an answer.
There you go. It just sheds light on what we're really dealing with. It's a bit darkening in terms of the mind that you would have in terms of what looks like a future for our nations. And all from this, that it's likely that in the course of the day we will hear, and by what percentage, President Yoweri Museveni continues as president of Uganda. Thank you for your thoughts this morning and to be able to share with us. It's coming into the next 2 years of elections around the continent. It would be interesting to see.
Zambia is coming up. Ethiopia is coming up.
Yep.
Media.
Indeed. And looking into Nigeria and other countries in 2027 and Kenya as well.
Well, Africa, we follow each other.
Yes, we
just
do.
the way we did during the transfer of power from the British.
Yeah.
Tanzania, 1961, Uganda, 1962, Kenya, 1963.
Yeah.
In like manner, Tanzania had its elections last year in October. Uganda's had his in January this year.
Yeah.
We will have ours as the last born of East Africa next year.
Well, thank you both. Dr. Mule Musau is the national coordinator of ELOG. And Dr. Kenneth Ombonge is the Associate Dean Research and Postgraduate Studies, University of Nairobi. Thank you very much for being
Thank you very
with
much.
us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Asante
The
sana.
first session in the new year.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Looking forward
All
to
the
more.
best in the new year.
Asante sana. It's 9:03.
This is The Situation Room